Hello there and welcome. This session is designed to help you ease into deep, restful sleep. We'll begin with a simple meditation to calm your body and quiet your mind. Then, as you drift closer to sleep, I'll introduce a gentle bedtime story, just enough to carry you into your dreams. Before we begin, press the like button and subscribe for more sleep story videos. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment saying where you're listening from and what time. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and take a deep breath in and out. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale gently. One more time, inhale deeply, filling your lungs with fresh, soothing air. And as you exhale, let go of the day, releasing any tension, any thoughts that no longer serve you. With each breath, feel your body becoming lighter, more at ease, sinking into comfort. You're doing great. Next, bring your awareness to the top of your head. Imagine a warm, gentle light resting there, like the soft glow of a bedside lamp. This light begins to spread slowly, easing away any tension in your forehead, softening the space between your eyebrows, relaxing your eyelids, your cheeks, your jaw. There's nothing you need to hold on to. Just let everything soften, loosen, unwind. Feel your shoulders drop slightly as if a weight has been lifted. Your arms become heavy, sinking into deep relaxation. With every breath, this warmth moves lower, your chest rising and falling effortlessly, your stomach soft and calm, your legs and feet completely at rest. The world around you fades into quiet. There is nothing to do, nowhere to be. Just this moment, just rest. Imagine yourself wrapped in a cozy, soft blanket of stillness, safe, warm, and peaceful. Each breath carries you deeper into comfort, deeper into rest, deeper into sleep. And here's tonight's cozy bedtime story. I arrived at the ivy-covered stone cottage just as the sun dipped below the rolling hills, casting everything in a golden haze. My hands trembled as I cut the engine, exhaustion weighing down on me like the overstuffed suitcases in the trunk. The drive from the city had been longer than I anticipated, winding through unfamiliar countryside roads that twisted and turned until I questioned if I'd ever arrive. I'd traded glass towers and morning lattes for silence and green fields. But now that I was here, an unsettling feeling clawed at my chest. Stepping out of the car, the gravel crunched under my feet. The cottage was as charming as I remembered from the listing. Stone walls softened by thick ivy, a wooden door with peeling blue paint, and a garden that had long surrendered to the wild. It smelled of earth and damp leaves, a far cry from the crisp sterility of my high-rise apartment. I inhaled deeply. This was the fresh start I wanted, needed. But as I fumbled for the keys and finally pushed open the stubborn door, doubt settled in. The interior was dim, dust motes swirling in the last rays of light filtering through lace curtains. The furniture was sturdy but aged. The wooden floors creaked with every step, and the kitchen, well, let's just say my old takeout menus wouldn't be much help here. I had no idea where to start. Dropping my bags in the entryway, I rubbed my temples. Slowing down was supposed to be a relief, yet my body thrummed with the restless energy of a woman used to running on deadlines and coffee. I glanced at my phone out of habit. No notifications, no emails, no one needing me. The silence was deafening. A sharp knock at the door startled me. My heart leaped, and for a brief, ridiculous moment, I considered not answering. But then I heard a cheerful hum, followed by another, more insistent knock. I opened the door to find an older woman standing there, clutching a basket covered with a floral cloth. Her silver curls framed a face lined with age, but bright with curiosity. She had the air of someone who knew things, particularly things about me, before I even introduced myself. "You must be Lily," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I'm Nell. I live just down the lane." Before I could respond, she bustled past me into the cottage, untying the cloth from her basket. The smell of fresh-baked scones filled the space, and my stomach betrayed me with an audible growl. "Figured you'd be hungry after the drive." She set the basket down on the kitchen table and gave the room an appraising glance. Lord, this place needs some love. I swallowed, suddenly defensive. Oh, don't you worry. We'll get you sorted." She patted my arm as if we were old friends. "I suppose you don't know a thing about tending a garden." I shook my head and she tutted. "Thought so. And what about the fireplace? Needs a good cleaning before you even think about lighting it." Again, I shook my head, and she sighed in a way that was both exasperated and amused. "Bless your heart. City folk always think they can just plop down in the countryside and everything will be quaint and easy." I bristled, but forced a smile. "I'm sure I'll figure it out." "Oh, you will." She handed me a scone, still warm. "But not without some guidance. This place has history, Lily, and history needs tending just like a garden." I took a hesitant bite, buttery, flaky, with a hint of lemon. My defenses wavered. "Thank you." She beamed, satisfied, and rattled off a list of things I'd need. Wood for the fireplace, tools for the overgrown garden, proper curtains unless I wanted the whole village peering in. By the time she left, my head spun, and the cottage, once filled with the eerie stillness of abandonment, suddenly felt less lonely. That night, exhaustion finally won, and I collapsed onto the old but sturdy bed in the corner room. The mattress was lumpy, the blankets heavy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace settling into my bones. Then, just as sleep was pulling me under, I heard it, a rustling outside. I jolted awake, heart hammering. It wasn't the wind. It was heavier, deliberate. My mind raced with possibilities, all of them ridiculous. A bear? A burglar? A ghost? Slowly I crept to the window, lifting the curtain just enough to peek outside. Moonlight bathed the porch, illuminating a small, curled-up shape nestled against the door. A dog. A scruffy, dirt-covered, shaggy-haired dog, fast asleep as if my porch had always been his home. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. A stray, probably. Lost. Hungry. Opening the door as quietly as I could, I stepped outside. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't stir. Up close he looked rough, his fur tangled, his ribs faintly visible beneath the mess. My heart ached at the sight of him. He reminded me a little of myself, worn out, lost, unsure of where he belonged. I crouched down, careful not to startle him. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. His eyes fluttered open, wary at first, then softening as he took me in. He didn't move, didn't growl, just watched. "Looks like we both ended up here, huh?" His tail gave the tiniest wag, and for the first time since arriving, I felt something loosen inside me. Maybe, just maybe, neither of us had arrived at the wrong place after all. Finn has become my shadow. I wake up to the soft rustling of his paws against the wooden floorboards, the warmth of his scruffy body pressed against my feet as if to say, "Time to start the day." I groan, shifting under the covers, but he is relentless. A wet nose nudges my hand, and before I know it, I'm slipping into my boots, grumbling about how I never asked for a walking companion. The air is crisp, tinged with the scent of damp earth and the salt of the nearby sea. The early morning fog clings to the trees, whispering through the leaves as we meander along the narrow dirt path that curves around the cottage. Finn trots ahead, his tail wagging like a metronome, while I trudge behind, hands stuffed into my coat pockets. I don't know when these walks became routine, but now they feel inevitable. Back at the cottage, I find Nell waiting, her apron already smudged with soil. "Took you long enough," she says with a wink, handing me a pair of gloves. "I thought you'd run away to the city while I wasn't looking." I roll my eyes but slide my hands into the gloves. Not yet. We spend the morning kneeling in the dirt, turning over soil that hasn't been touched in years. The scent of earth surrounds us, rich and damp, clinging to my skin like an old memory. Nell hums as she works, a melody I don't recognize but find oddly soothing. I catch myself enjoying the process. Something about the rhythmic pull of weeds, the careful placement of seedlings, the promise of something new growing in place of what was lost. I don't tell Nell that, of course. She'd be too smug about it. By the time the sun reaches its peak, my arms ache, and my fingernails are lined with dirt. I stretch, wincing slightly, but the sight of the neat little rows we've cultivated makes the effort seem worthwhile. Finn watches from the porch, his head resting on his paws, his golden eyes half-lidded in contentment. "I'd say we earned a break," Nell declares, brushing her hands off on her apron. "You should go to the market, see if James Weston still has that wood he promised you." I hesitate. I had forgotten about that. James Weston, the quiet, steady carpenter who offered to help fix my dilapidated fence. I met him once, briefly, at the market when I was buying fresh bread. He had strong hands, calloused palms, and a quiet sort of presence that made him seem immovable, like the trees in the forest. I hadn't given him an answer about the fence, but now, with Finn's growing curiosity and the way he's taken to poking his nose through the gaps, it seems like a necessity. The market is bustling when I arrive. Stalls are lined with fresh produce, woven baskets, jars of honey that gleam under the sunlight. The scent of fresh herbs and baked bread wraps around me, pulling me deeper into the crowd. I find James where Nell said he'd be, stacking planks of wood onto his cart. "Lily," he greets me, dipping his head slightly. His voice is deep, unhurried. "You decided on the fence?" I nod, shifting my weight. "Yeah, Finn's got a habit of trying to escape, and I'd rather not chase him into the woods every day." A ghost of a smile tugs at his lips. "Wise choice. I can come by tomorrow if that works." "That works." There's a pause, not uncomfortable, just lingering. James studies me for a moment, then reaches for something inside his cart. "Here," he says, handing me a small wooden carving of a dog. Rough, but carefully shaped, the details etched with care. I take it, surprised. "Did you—" "Thought it looked a bit like Finn," he says, as if that explains everything. Then before I can respond, he nods again and turns back to his work. I walk home with the carving tucked into my pocket, feeling its weight with every step. That evening, as I sit on the porch with Finn at my feet, Margot calls. "You're still there?" she says, as if I've defied some natural law. "Still here," she sighs. "Lily, come on. You've had your little retreat. The city's waiting. Work is waiting. You can't just disappear forever." I glance out at the garden, the freshly planted rose swaying gently in the breeze. I feel the warmth of Finn curled against my leg, the carved wooden dog resting in my palm. The night air carries the scent of damp soil, of something new, something growing. "I'm not so sure about that," I say. The scent of rosemary lingered on my fingertips long after the dough was set to rise. It clung to my skin like a whisper of warmth, something grounding, something real. I watched as Nell wiped her hands on her apron and smiled at me, a knowing look in her eyes. "There's nothing quite like fresh bread," she said, patting the counter before stepping away to check on the kettle. I nodded, feeling the stretch in my shoulders where tension used to sit like an unwelcome guest. My days in the cottage had softened me, uncoiled something tightly wound within. I had always moved through life at a frantic pace, but here, kneading dough and pulling weeds, I had found something I hadn't realized I was missing. Stillness. Outside, Finn lay sprawled in the weak winter sunlight, his tail flicking in contentment. He had taken to napping in the same spot in the garden, near the rosemary bush where the earth was soft and warm. I envied his ability to surrender so completely to the present moment. I turned back to the counter, dusting a bit more flour over the waiting dough. It would need time to rise, just as I had needed time to breathe. Nell had taught me that much without ever saying it outright. She had simply handed me a journal one evening and said, "You don't have to write anything profound, just write." So I did. At first, the words came hesitantly, like water trickling from a cracked faucet, but soon they poured out in earnest. Pages filled with thoughts I hadn't let myself dwell on before. The exhaustion I had carried, the expectations I had buckled under, the way silence in the cottage had wrapped around me like a long-forgotten lullaby. That night, the storm rolled in, turning the sky a deep, bruised gray. I could hear the wind whistling through the eaves, rattling the windows like an impatient visitor. I lit candles, their soft glow casting flickering shadows against the walls, and settled by the fire with a cup of tea. I wasn't afraid exactly, but the storm brought a restlessness I couldn't quite shake. A knock at the door startled me. James. He stood on the threshold, rain dripping from his coat, his expression unreadable. "Just checking on you," he said simply, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. I stepped aside, letting him in, the scent of damp earth trailing after him. "The power's out," I told him, gesturing to the candles. "Figured it might be. Thought you could use some company." I busied myself pouring another cup of tea, feeling oddly grateful for his presence. We sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between us, the storm raging just beyond the walls. I glanced at him then, the candlelight softening the edges of his face. There was something in his eyes, an understanding, quiet and steady, as if he saw past the words I never spoke. I didn't know what to say, so I just sipped my tea and let the silence settle around us, warm as the rising dough waiting in the kitchen. I stretched my legs out on the porch, the warm wood beneath me heated by the afternoon sun. The smell of lavender and rosemary swirled in the breeze, wrapping around me like a familiar embrace. The countryside had become my refuge, my sanctuary, and for the first time in years I felt still, at peace. The hum of bees working in the garden, the distant lowing of cattle, and the occasional bark from Finn. This was the music of my life now. Then my phone pinged. I hesitated before picking it up, already sensing the shift in the air. My heart thudded as I read the name on the screen. Mark Caldwell, my former boss. The one I had walked away from in search of something else. With trembling fingers, I opened the email. "Lily, we need you back. A new opportunity has come up, one you'd be perfect for. Let's talk." Just like that, my carefully built world trembled at its foundation. My mind spun. I had worked for years to earn my place in the city, to be recognized, to feel like I mattered. And now, when I was finally feeling like I belonged here, the life I had left behind was pulling me back. I set my phone down, pressing my fingers against my temples. Maybe I was wasting time in the countryside. Maybe this was just a retreat, a pit stop before returning to where I was supposed to be. My breath hitched at the thought of leaving Finn, the little stone house, the garden, and James. A shiver ran through me. Finn barked, pulling me from my thoughts. Our morning walks had become a ritual, a way to start the day in sync with the land. It grounded me in ways I hadn't expected. I grabbed his leash, trying to shake off the weight of the email, and stepped outside. The forest path was familiar, the rhythm of Finn's paws against the earth soothing. But then, halfway through, Finn darted ahead, disappearing into the trees. "Finn!" Panic flared in my chest. I called again, running after him, the underbrush catching at my clothes. My lungs burned, my heart hammering. I crashed through branches, my vision blurring with fear. The idea of losing him, of this place suddenly feeling empty, was unbearable. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I stumbled upon an opening in the woods, my breath coming in ragged gasps. And then there he was. Finn, muddy and grinning, wagging his tail as if nothing had happened. Relief flooded me, but so did something else. The realization that I couldn't leave, that I didn't want to. The very thought of abandoning this life, this peace, twisted my stomach in a way that no city job ever had. I sank onto my knees, wrapping my arms around Finn, inhaling the scent of damp fur and earth. I had become attached, not just to Finn, but to this, the stillness, the rawness of life here, and to James. Nell's voice rang in my head as I sat in her kitchen later that day recounting the morning. She had a way of distilling truths I hadn't yet admitted to myself. Healing isn't about running away, love. It's about choosing what feeds your soul. Her words settled deep within me. I had been running for so long, thinking peace would come from achieving, from proving something. But maybe, just maybe, peace was choosing to stay still. That night I opened Mark's email again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed, "Thank you, but I've already found what I was looking for." As I hit send, Finn curled up at my feet. The garden swayed outside the window, bathed in moonlight, and I knew I was exactly where I belonged. The crisp morning air carries the scent of earth and late-blooming roses as I step onto the cottage's small porch, a cup of tea warming my hands. The summer is slipping away, but for the first time in years, I don't feel the familiar pressure of its passing. The countdown to reality isn't looming over me like a storm cloud. There's no looming return flight, no deadlines that feel like shackles, no expectation to slip back into a life that never quite fit. Instead, there is this, a slow golden morning in the place that has become home. I watch the garden sway gently in the early breeze. The tomatoes are heavy on their vines. The lavender spills onto the stone path. And the bread in the oven, Finn's favorite, will be ready soon. I feel the warmth of contentment deep in my chest. I made this garden, this home, this version of me who isn't rushing through life but actually living it. My phone buzzes on the table beside me, breaking the stillness. I pick it up, half expecting some tether from my old life to drag me back. Instead, it's an email from the editor of the small lifestyle magazine I had tentatively submitted an essay to. I hesitate before opening it, my heart a little too eager. "Lily, we loved your piece. It's just the kind of voice we're looking for. We'd love to publish it. Let's talk about more work soon." A laugh bubbles out of me before I can stop it. I set my tea down, reading the email again just to make sure I'm not imagining it. I've always written in the quiet moments of my life, but I never thought it would amount to anything. But here it is. Proof that I can do this, that I can work on my own terms, that I don't have to give up this life to have a career. A bark sounds in the distance, and moments later, Finn comes bounding into the garden, his tail wagging wildly, his golden fur catching the morning light. He skids to a stop in front of me, his eyes bright with excitement. "What have you been up to?" I ask, scratching behind his ears. He huffs happily before turning toward the village path, as if urging me to follow. I do. The village is waking up slowly, and I savor every familiar sight. Mrs. Aldridge is outside her shop, sweeping fallen leaves from the doorway. She waves as I pass. The bakery smells of cinnamon and warm butter, its windows fogged from the heat of the ovens. The old bookshop owner, Mr. Harrow, nods at me from behind a stack of books. There is something deeply comforting about these routines, these people who have, over the summer, become my people. I'm nearly at the square when I hear my name. Lily. I turn to see James walking toward me, his hands in his pockets, his usual easy smile in place. He stops just in front of me, tilting his head slightly as he studies me. "You look like you belong here," he says after a moment. I smile. I feel like I do. His gaze lingers, and then he nods toward the path leading toward the orchard. "Do you want to stay for autumn?" Autumn. The thought of crisp air, golden leaves, and evenings spent by the fire fills me with something warm and undeniable. I could say yes just to that, to the season, to a little more time, but I know the truth as soon as the question leaves his lips. I'm not just staying for autumn, I'm staying for good. My smile widens as I nod. "I'd love to." James grins, as if he already knew the answer. And maybe deep down so did I.